all Winnipeg fans across the U.S. and Canada. You're now boarding the Winnipeg terminal on a very dismal sort of Wednesday afternoon. I know that I'm your host, Mike D'Andrea. I'm here with Joe Pritchard, and I always ask how you're doing, but you know what? I'm not even in the mood for the pleasantries. It was a brutal series. We might as well just dive right into that. Let's get the bad news out of the way before we start to shift our focus to all of the good that may be heading down the road for Winnipeg sports. We won't necessarily say the Jets. What do you say to that one, Joe?
See, I like how we have a differing backgrounds right now. Like yours is all doom and gloom, and mine's like all bright and shiny. And well, look at what logos we're wearing. So
I
we
think
put
that's pretty spot on. And
yeah, it's almost we didn't even plan this; it just happened that way.
Didn't, yeah. And I was this close to wearing literally any other jersey that I have. I wore my Line A one today, so that just goes to show how gloom and doom I'm feeling right now. So yeah, brutal, brutal, brutal. There's a lot of words that aren't necessarily appropriate for the airwaves that I want to use right now in regards to that series. But I'm going to ask you first, Joe, of all of the things that went wrong in that series, because there's a lot to pick from, what do you think was the biggest thing that caused the Jets to tank as bad as they did?
They couldn't control the tempo. Colorado dictated the tempo of the entire series, and playing a fast action game against a team with that much front end talent and second line talent. Because if I remember correctly, we were talking about thinking Winnipeg had better depth. Well, wrong.
Depth did not show up
No.
whatsoever. And I'd argue the only players that showed up in that series, and this might be a hot take because of his save percentage, but if you look at the actual chances that were on Hellebuck, I mean, you set him up for absolute failure, but he still showed up to play. Now, granted, I was on the bandwagon of saying maybe for Game 5 we should have went with Brossoit, not necessarily because Hellebuck was playing bad, but because he was so overworked. It's not even funny. Like when you're averaging almost 40 shots day in and day out in the postseason, and how many of those were grade A chances on the rush, or just the defense was not jamming the middle. That was something that I noticed a lot of in this series, because when we were on that successful run, all the winning streaks that we were on, did you notice when we were playing defensive hockey, when we were playing in our own zone, we would always force it to the outside. We never allowed the middle. We never allowed anything in the slot. But what did we have all series long? I mean, the slot was wide open. You might as well have ushered, Nichushkin, who was the thorn in our side that series, might as well have just ushered him right to the net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That scoreless streak we had in, what was it, late January, early February, I think that just came to bite us, because after that, the Jets opened their game up and they never really figured out again how to close the door. Because before that, you weren't scoring on the Jets. And now they became an average defensive team after they opened up the game because their scoring was down for a while.
That's a good take on it, too, because they really did change their style up for play, which was great for success in the regular season. But, when you're playing a team that's as offensive heavy as Colorado was, I mean, you have to tighten up the defense because, I mean, game one was pretty much like the story where you have to outscore them. There's no playing good defense against a team like Colorado. They're going to light the lamp on you multiple times every game. So you kind of have to either play the best defense that you can against that very top-heavy offense, or you have to outscore them 7-6,
Mm-hmm. And the only reason they outscored them 7-6 in game one is because Georgiev couldn't see the puck that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
off game at a bad time, but he got it back together, and after that, forget it.
Yeah, that just the defense was probably the worst. The only other players that showed up, my hot take is out of the way now. I think that Hellebuck did show up to play despite the subpar save percentage and goals against average. However, other players that showed up, I think Morrissey, he came to play. Lowry definitely came to play, and Scheifele was hungry in that series too. It's a shame the rest of the team didn't show up, but if you want to take something away from that, it's nice to see some of those guys, show up.
Yeah, I mean the core is there. They were giving a ton of effort. The complaints that we had about this team last year aren't really valid anymore. The one thing you could do is if you wanted to be really doom and gloom about things is go, oh, we had the same result as last year, out in 5. I would say you have a point. On the other hand, it's a different set of circumstances. And we have a different core group now that had to learn how to be a core group instead of being pieces to a whole. A lot of changes were made during the season. This team is still not a complete team, as much as it looked like they could have been in December and January.
Mm-hmm.
It's only been less than a year since the last core was dismantled.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a little bit of time. The results this season were better. The effort levels were better. It's time next year's and a bad matchup in the first round.
Yeah.
Because what was it, 12 more points this year, but we faced a team that had one less point than we did in the regular season instead of having an actual advantage where in a different playoff format or a different season, it might have been a different story. So I would say you have a point if you go, yes, it was the same result as last year. In the fact that they didn't advance in the playoffs and they didn't look particularly good in the playoffs. I think this is an ascending team now, instead of a team that happened to get hot at one point and weren't the same team as when they got hot.
Mm-hmm.
As in last year's group, not this year's.
What's going to be interesting is our UFAs that we have. I would imagine that at least 2 of them we would try to re-sign. I would love to see Toffoli return. Don't think that's happening. Monahan is one that I feel like could go either way. He definitely found his game that he had in Calgary. He found it in Winnipeg again. So I have a feeling that that might factor into it. Brendan Dillon, if he doesn't re-sign, that's a rough way to go. What happened with him? Dylan DeMello, another UFA. I don't know about him. I mean, he's that guy that shows up. He's not a top D man, but he shows up to play, and I respect his game.
And he seems to work well with Morrissey, so there's that too.
And then Colin Miller, where there was when Dylan was out, there was a lot of speculation. Is he going to play? But obviously wasn't the case. And then Brossoit, I'd love to see him back, but I don't know. I mean, he did show a little bit of loyalty to Winnipeg after coming back this time around. You'd love to see that again, but can you blame him for wanting to go elsewhere, especially when Hellebuck was struggling the way he was, for them to not consider putting him in for more than a period?
I think he gets rich in the offseason, and I don't blame him one bit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then RFAs, another one where a lot of folks were questioning if he was going to crack the lineup at all in the postseason. Cole Perfetti, he is a restricted free agent. David Gustafson, another RFA. And the last one that, you kind of want to see, you're curious about this one, but Logan Stanley. I'm very curious to see what they do with him.
I think a lot of what the moves they're going to be making next year are going to hinge on whether Rick Bowness comes back.
And
I
he's
don't
getting up
think.
there in age too.
Yeah, I don't think Cheveldayoff will let him go. They'll say, "Hey, we're going to move on to something else," but Rick Bowness might call it a day because he's going to be 70 soon.
Yeah.
So there's only so much more time he's got, and you have his replacement already on the bench in Scott Arniel. So you might as well. If Bonus has got another season in him, I think they go one way. If he doesn't, and by one way I mean maybe they trade Cole Perfetti because he doesn't seem to be a fit for what Bonus wants to do, because clearly he hasn't been in the lineup nearly as much lately. And they keep Stanley. But if it's Arniel or potentially somebody else, who knows, then I think they would keep Perfetti and maybe move on from Stanley. I don't think both come back either which way. Or, you go lower, maybe a 1-year bridge deal for both of them potentially, or for one or both, depending on which one you're willing to let free at the end of next season too, because nobody signs restricted free agents.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, and it's almost like we have a similar amount of question marks as we did at the beginning of this past season too. Where do we go from here? And I agree with you in that this team is ascending, so I feel like they're not going to sell the farm, which that's good. But now
we know who the core is, and that we didn't know. We didn't know that at this point last year. We didn't know what core was coming back.
That's a good point. And then, when you signed the matching deals to Helly and Scheifele, that kind of solidified some things.
Yes, it did.
And one more little to go back to this series, and then maybe we can put this to rest. But the special teams, I just really wanted to hit on that since we haven't really touched on it. But we took way too many penalties. I know I'm just speaking the obvious here, but there were a few soft calls for the postseason. Sure, you could say that, but the discipline just was not there. Like I'm all for playing physical, especially when you're down in a playoff series to a division rival like that. I'm all for it. But there's a difference between physical play and irresponsible play. And
letting your frustrations cost you 2 minutes.
Yeah. And for example, like, what game was that where I want to say it was game 3 or 4. I can't, it was one of the ones in Denver, but Appleton, right off the face-off, someone tripped over his stick. That was just unfortunate, right? Yep. It happens. It was unfortunate, but that's the name of the game. And then the other one from Gabe Velarde, the double minor where he whacked Taves in the face with his stick, that something like that, that's irresponsible. You got to watch. I know that there didn't seem to be malice with it, but you can't be doing that. Like, that was one that really frustrated me.
I think what I'm hearing out of all of this is it wouldn't be a bad idea if the Jets found one more guy that could stand up in the locker room and wear the A. I mean, you got Lowry, you have Scheifele. He's showing he really impressed the hell out of me this year compared to what I've seen in the past. Maybe one more guy with stature would be great.
Yeah, it'll be a really interesting look at the free agent market and the trade market too. See what we can do to, this isn't going to be a rebuild. This will be a retool. I feel like, being that we still have that established core, we still have those guys that are in their prime. I mean, like you said, we saw the way that Scheifele was playing in the series and arguably most of the year. Sure, there were times where he didn't show up, but like that's anybody. There's days where McDavid doesn't show up. It's the name of the game.
Hmm. And they have options too. It's not like the Moose aren't stocked with talent either. So if you lose a Monahan, you lose a Toffoli, you decide to move on from RFA, you got somebody that's going to be able to fill in too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much across the board.
I mean, you see a guy like Janssen
and
Fjallby.
we're not even mentioning Rutger McGroarty yet. He's a year away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I'm cautiously optimistic for the next couple of years. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here.
Yeah, I felt like last year's offseason could have gone many different ways. This year's offseason, there's some interesting subplots, but it's going to be, let's build upon the foundation we already have in place instead of who is our foundation.
I'm just glad that we're not in a situation like Chicago was. Sure, they got a guy like Bedard out of it, but for like the last couple of years, and of course this year they were basement dwellers too. But they tried to keep that Stanley Cup team together way too long, and we're seeing that unfold in Pittsburgh too. But there's a little difference with Pittsburgh because you could say that Patrick Kane was still at the top of his game as well. And I mean, you have a guy like Crosby who seems to be ageless. But it's just something is not working. Coaching is not working out. And you can ask any Penguins fan that. Coaching has not been there. And they're looking like a retirement home with some of their players. They're an old team. And that's what happened with Chicago, and look at what happened with them. Also, pour one out for the boys. Grabbed an extra one for today.
There you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, because what? Pittsburgh's going to have, 2 or 3 years in the wilderness, and then they'll win the lottery and have the next. Right? That's how this works?
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, well, that's enough of the gloom and doom. I think that we should start to focus on the good that's coming to Winnipeg sports. So, Joe, I'm going to let you take over on this one. Let's go.
Interesting that we were talking about the Penguins and transition into the Bombers, because both of them have championship cores that are aging.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be an interesting thing to see. And I've said this a couple months ago when we were kind of being a bit better with mixing things up, whereas the last month or two of the show has been all Jets because, playoffs, right? And such things like that. But yeah, when it comes to the Bombers, I think there's a 2-year window left here. There's this year and next. Right. Winnipeg is hosting in 2025. That's the Hollywood ending. If they win and a bunch of guys ride up into the sunset, I could see that happening, and you have a complete rebuild after that because you got not a whole lot left.
Right.
And I would take 3 or 4 years of, okay, let's find the next foundation if they could walk away with that one. I'm not even talking about this year's, although I'd love this year's too.
I mean, hey, you can find a diamond in the rough too, and basically do a 1-year rebuild and then find yourself back in contention. That's not likely, but it's possible.
And they've put themselves in the position to do that because they have a third string quarterback they like so far. It's going to be interesting to see how much they like him after training camp, preseason, all that fun stuff. But they don't have to have a guy that's the backup quarterback that can come in if Zach gets hurt for a couple games, and a third down guy because they got both of those guys in Chris Chevler. So they can use the third spot to go, you are the quarterback of 2026 as long as you can prove you can play.
Strevler is like Brossois.
Exactly.
Love the guy for his loyalty.
A handy piece to have there. My theory on backup quarterbacks in the CFL is I'd like them if they could handle a month and not crater you. If you're asking for anything more than that, good luck.
Yeah.
But if you got a guy that can get you 2-2, even keep you 1-3 if you have a tough schedule in that stretch, and still have something to work with when it comes to Um, when the starter comes back, great. Your backup's done his job. You're not and in the CFL, there's very few quarterbacks that play all 18 games. It just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen. I actually ran the numbers like 5-6 years ago and went, wow, it just doesn't happen. Whereas in the NFL, if you have a backup that plays more than a game or two, you're screwed already. Whereas
Yeah.
in the CFL, everybody has their backup start at least 1 or 2 games, it seems like.
And honestly, I like that because it changes things up. You kind of wish that you would see that a little more in the NFL. It keeps the game fresh, of course, but also, you pay these guys, sometimes a couple 100,000 in the NFL. I'm talking couple
Right.
100,000 or even millions just to ride the bench to basically do nothing except run a few reps at practice and maybe go in at garbage time, but that's not going to develop anyone. Say, like, for example, with the Steelers, with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, you'd kind of hope that you'd develop a guy like Fields, since he's likely going to be, if he's not the future, he's at least going to be probably next year's quarterback for them, barring any huge issues. Um, but that's one thing the CFL really does right.
Yeah, they seem to have a lot more backup quarterback play, and it's just the nature of the beast too. It's a lot more of the quarterbacks tend to be a little bit more athletic, take more chances, and don't just sit in the pocket. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to take some dings, they're going to take some hits. That's just part of what it is.
And then you have a guy like Strevler, who is your quarterback slash fullback.
Fullback. That Banjo Bowl in 2019 was something to
Yeah.
behold, where he's just running over the Riders, and the
Mm-hmm.
Riders were a decent team that year too. He's just running them over. Like, that's why I came up here. That's why I hopped on a plane.
Mm-hmm. Man, oh man, I love that team. You had Calaro, Strevler, Harris. Oh, rip.
Yeah, and that was the last year of Matt Nichols too. He didn't get
Yeah.
nearly enough credit for helping grow the team from when he took over in 2015 from Drew Willie. I mean, they tried Willie again at the beginning of 16 because he got hurt in 2015 in front of my very eyes in Hamilton. I mean, that was an interesting experience. Hamilton was up 21-0 with 8 minutes left in the first quarter, so you know how well that went.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that was that year in just a nutshell right there. But then Nichols came in a couple weeks later, won the Banjo Bowl, got the team back off the floor from like 1-4 into the 2016 and got them to the playoffs. Nobody talks about where they were before. Matt Nichols was the bridge from nothing to Zach is here now. He's off to the next level.
Mm. So, what are your thoughts on the upcoming season? Any big predictions?
Not yet. I got to do. I've spent a lot more time this past 3-4 months thinking about hockey than I ever had before in my life.
It was an
So
exciting
it
run.
was, and that if you can separate the end result from the ride, it feels a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, the ride was definitely great. And
Right.
I'm I'm looking forward to next season already. I gotta put some dates on the calendar, maybe try to hit up a couple games sometime next year.
Yeah, we'll have to see when Minnesota's back in town, or Minnesota's hosting the Jets and such.
Yeah.
This year
Ugh.
just didn't line up for me at all.
Yeah, I thought
Um,
about going to a game at the Excel Energy Center, but um, it didn't end up working out. But I went to one technically two last year, but
mhm.
one in each season. I went last March, um, and then I went in December. So, yeah, I'm gonna try to plan at least one game there next year, and maybe in 2 years or so, maybe I could take my daughter to a game.
There you go. Get her started early.
Yep, she's got the Jets onesie already.
Good. And next year she'll be big enough to wear it.
Exactly. So she has a Steelers onesie and she has a Jets onesie. Now she just needs a Pirates onesie, but I would probably not put it on her, being that they've been getting embarrassed by the A's. Yeah, I will say that one more time. They're getting embarrassed by the A's.
Mm-hmm. The homeless A's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's just say my taste in sports right now, my teams are less than stellar. I mean, the Jets, like we said, had a good ride, but the end result wasn't quite what we wanted. So.
No, I'm just looking for. It's very unusual for me to look forward to preseason anything, but it happens to be that the first preseason game for the CFL is Bombers versus Riders. Happens to be on my birthday, right as I get off of work.
That's nice.
Close the computer, put my feet up. Since it's right after I get off from work, throw pizza in, be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
There's my birthday celebration right there.
There you go. Wouldn't want it any other way.
And don't get hurt. Don't get hurt.
That's
also beat the Riders, but don't get hurt.
Yeah, preseason. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to beat the Riders. It's always great to beat the Riders, but I'd rather them lose and stay healthy for the regular season. That's just me.
Yeah, we have higher aspirations in a preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, like my buddy in Winnipeg says, it's going to be nice watching the Bombers this year because in that case, we'll be the team with the elite talent. Set around Game 3 of the playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, that was, I don't know. I like how we were saying too about this show. Of course we had a bye week, but we were saying, how did you word it? Do one on Wednesday post-mortem.
Yeah, it was Sunday. We actually had lunch on Sunday.
Yeah,
and it was pregame. And I'm just like, I know how this is going to end. We were thinking about doing one on Sunday after the game, but I'm just like, why do one when we're down 3-1? Let's just do it Wednesday like we usually do. They'll be done on Tuesday night. We'll just do the postmortem then.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it was.
And when I saw Nikujan's first goal last night, I'm like, yep, I was dead on. Because the Jets got the fluke one, and then 2 minutes later,
Pionk got a goal. Pionk got a goal. Just maybe the wrong net.
Yeah, 2 minutes later, wide open net for Nikujan, and it's like, cover that guy and don't leave him the entire net. Okay, well, that's my qualifications to be an NHL head coach right there. That's the most I have. So.
Yeah, same. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd have had the boys try to force the puck out of the slot, get it to the corners, get it to the boards. But hey, anyone can armchair coach. You put me actually behind the bench, and yeah, I could have all of the talent in the world, and I'd probably lose to a peewee team.
Yeah, that's how that would actually go. But that's why we do this, right?
Exactly. We can do hindsight all the time, and we can act like we would be the best coaches ever, and in reality, we would not. We'll just say that.
I think as long as we admit that, it's okay if we say stupid stuff once in a while.
Yep. And I think the viewers and listeners know that. All right. Well, anything else? I think that we've pretty much covered it all that we needed to. We looked ahead at the Bombers season, and we covered the abysmal playoff series, and even hit at a little bit of free agency news.
Yep. I think as we get closer to when free agency hits, we'll dual that back into the Jets and cover the comings and goings. It'll be an interesting offseason. I think it's going to be a pivotal offseason, not quite like last year's, like I've said before, but it's going to be.
We have a goal in mind. It's not a rebuild.
Can they build on this plateau, or is this as high as they go?
Yep, that'll be the questions that need to be answered. All right. Well, this is the Winnipeg terminal. We are clear for landing. For the dub, go Jets, go.